Ruhail Mohammad. He is the CEO of Lucky Electric Power Company Limited. I'm turning over now for his extensive and fascinating bio because he is a man whose career spans over 35 years. Ruhail has held various C-suite positions in companies focused on everything from chemicals to energy. So you get a sense there of his broad scope of knowledge. And he is here specifically to talk to us about the state of the industrial power sector. So please join me in welcoming Ruhail Mohammad to the stage. Thank you very much indeed, sir.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at such an occasion. It's a pleasure interacting with professionals like yourself, and I'll be happy to take questions at the end of my presentation. So while I was thinking about what to talk about, and this entire conference is about the energy sector, I thought about certain issues or certain themes which you hear in the newspapers and the media very commonly. And I thought I'll just pick up some of them and try to explain to professionals here. Maybe they are lending to the power sector, they're risk underwriters, they're providing services, or even part of the owner's team. So to explain to them and give a little perspective as well as to where we are right now. I've sort of titled this State of the Industry because a lot of data I've used is from the State of Industry report by the regulator, which is NEPRA. So I thought it was a good thing. Okay, so what I'll talk about is there are 4 sub-subjects here. One is the energy mix. I think there was, and I apologize if there's some repetition from some of the speakers this morning. So the energy mix in terms of the capacity, want to specifically talk about coal, which will provide, inshallah, energy security to Pakistan. Circular debt is an ongoing subject, why we are and how it can get resolved. And finally, some of the issues and the solutions which were given to the government. I was part of a committee by the Pakistan Business Council, the Energy Committee. And instead of talking in vague terms, I thought we'll talk about specific steps the government can take and the direct rupee impact of each step, basically. So let's talk about the generation capacity. So it's all, as you probably have heard in the morning, we have thermal, which is gas, oil, coal, hydropower, nuclear, renewable, which is solar and wind as well. Our capacity as per NEPRA is almost 44,000 megawatts, and that's what people refer to as we have excess capacity, which is correct. But just keep in mind that this includes a lot of hydel power, which is really available, say, June, July onwards till October, November. So in certain months, this hydel power is not available. But the good thing is that in the winter months, our demand is also lower, so that sort of compensates. There is only a certain period of time, which is April to June, when it's sort of a semi-summer in Pakistan. It gets warm, especially in the south, and you switch on air conditioning, which is a big portion of the demand. So at that point in time, if the peak demand is like 27, 28, then you are almost touching your capacity. But by and large, you have surplus capacity. The actual generation during last year, 22-23 data which we have, is 138,000 gigawatt hours, which is equivalent to 16,000 megawatts, which I'm trying to say is that if we didn't have cyclicality in the demand supply, if you just draw a flat line for all the 12 months, then the equivalent would be 16,000 megawatts, right? So that shows again the gap between the actual consumption and the capacity we have. This is down from almost 10% from the previous year. And that is because of macro conditions, which we're all aware of, high interest rates, high tariffs going up, people trying to cut down, and so on and so forth. Now, demand reduction is one of the biggest issues affecting Pakistan's power sector. So why did we get there in terms of this high capacity is because in just 2013-14 timeframe, when we were launching CPEC, there was load shedding to the extent of 12 hours a day in big cities like Karachi and Lahore. And the PMLN government that came in at that time, their basic slogan was, we want to eliminate load shedding, and that's how so much capacity was added. Maybe in the excitement, a bit too much got added. But at the same time, two things I want to sort of point is that the government plans for peak capacity rather than average capacity. So there you already have certain surplus. And at that time, they projected a 6% per annum GDP growth. And GDP growth and power growth has a very high correlation. So between the two, they projected at almost 6% growth, which did not materialize. As you know, we've been growing at 1%, 2%, 3% number in the last few years. So both these reasons, planning for the peak as well as assuming a high growth rate, is responsible for our excess capacity. So I've talked about the 30,000 megawatts is a summer phenomena. This is approximate number which is there, and it drops to 10,000. So therefore, it's difficult to plan. Ideally, spoken to a few experts, we should have planned for something like peak minus 10, 20%, and then use renewables to fill the gap for those months when the peak demand does kick in as such. That would have been the ideal combination. But anyway, what has happened has happened. So there are obviously a number of challenges in terms of the sector, inefficiencies in all the supply chain, throughout the chain, which is generation, transmission, and distribution. Underutilization of efficient plants, we talked about that. I'll talk about it a little further. The circular debt, governance, and so on and so forth. But the good thing is that when the expansion was planned, they did look at the fuel component, because the RFO was probably the most expensive fuel. So at least they realized that, and they opted for lower cost fuels like coal, as well as nuclear and LNG as such. So just want to take you through this table, and I've chosen 2014-15 as the base year. This is because prior to the CPEC project. So as you can see, our capacity at that time was only 23,000 megawatts, which has now grown to 43,000. But some of the themes that come out is that if you see the coal component, it has gone up significantly. It's gone up, the first line, 4,000 of imported coal, almost 3,000 of local coal, so over 7,000 megawatts of coal. Nuclear has come up significantly. So the point I'm trying to make is that RFO, which was probably the most expensive one, has been kept constant and will probably get phased out over the next few years. But hydel has been added, and further hydel is being added as we go along. A couple of new dams coming up as such. Unfortunately, if you see from a different perspective, our renewable mix is still about 30%, and it needs to grow. And our reliance on imported fuel is still there. So it's actually gone up from 20% to 30%. So we still haven't managed to get rid of, totally go to domestic fuels as such. So natural gas, as I said, is local gas has dwindled. And in that case, we have now LNG coming in as such. But a lot of capacity on coal has been added, which is on a per energy basis, $1 per MMBTU is probably the cheapest coal. Nuclear has been added as well, which is moderate as far as the cost is concerned. And in terms of renewable, I'll skip this portion. You must have heard an entire panel discussion on what the issues are in terms of evacuation, etc., which is causing that it's not fully utilized as such. So with that background, so the takeaways was, right now we have excess capacity and we don't need any more capacity for the next few years. The positive part was we shifted to low-cost fuels, but our reliance on imported fuel will still remain as we go along as such. Now, Thar coal is basically, I would say, the future whenever the next expansions are there. We have the 6th largest coal reserves in the world. 175 billion tons of Thar coal is there. So power generation was the first use that was sort of brought in. And almost of the domestic is about 3,300, and with the imported coal, we are still very much there. One thing which I want to sort of highlight here, which is not necessarily generally about coal, and there's a lot of criticism, that a lot of CO2, bad for the environment, bad for the climate, etc. That's true. But we have to look at our economic choices as well. So to show you some comparison, I've put some examples. So China today, whose total capacity must be like 1.8 million megawatts versus our 35, 40, still has 1.1 million megawatts of coal capacity, right? So and we are 7,500. So can you imagine we're less than 1% of China, and yet nobody criticizes China, and who was building coal plants till about a year ago, right? Even US, which has almost 200,000 megawatts, India has 200,000 megawatts. It's unfortunately the poorer countries like Pakistan which get criticized. So we should not be defensive. We need to take an economic call as to what we need for our energy mix. And the numbers are so small that it is nothing as compared to what the world capacity of coal power is, basically. So in Thar, basically we have just the two blocks which are currently developed and are expanding are 2 billion tons each, and can each produce something like 30 million tons per annum of Thar coal, which is good for like 5,000 megawatts each. So as I said, and the government has taken a decision, no more imported fuel plants. Everything, if it is a thermal plant, it has to be based on Thar or any other domestic reserves. Now, this table is not only important from a Thar perspective, but also to give you a perspective of different fuels. So today, imported coal is, I'm just looking at spot prices to give you a flavor of the comparison. So it's $120 per ton of coal, which translates to $5.50 per million BTU in terms of energy content. If you take it from a power generation, after accounting for the efficiency, it's 4.8 cents. And that 4.8 cents, and that for all the fuels, is what the government, when it wants to dispatch you, looks at the energy purchase price in terms of the cheapest gets dispatched the first. The capacity payment, which I'll talk about separately, is for imported coal is about 3.9 cents. So the total cost of generation, if you run an imported plant at full load, is about 8.7 cents, right? And Thar coal today is 7.1 cents. So you can see it's just not saving dollars, but it is also the cheapest fuel available right now. Look at RFO, the same basis, 13 cents. And RLNG, although the fuel component is very high, but on a dollar per megawatt installed capacity is lower. So overall, it's not too bad. It's almost 9 cents. It's still more expensive than coal, but at least so you could have a mix because that will be more environmental friendly, but it's clearly better than RFO. So another aspect which I wanted to talk about for Thar is the use for other products. So first of all, eventually cement, which imports 8-9 million tons of for coal for its own production, can be eventually converted to Thar coal. So 8-9 million would be equivalent of Thar would be about 18-19 million tons because of the calorific value. Then it can be used as fuel for automobiles and industry, like diesel and mogas. It can be used in further power generation whenever you want to expand capacity. In production of fertilizers, urea can be produced from there. We have a shortage of urea. Hydrogen, and it can also be, natural gas can also be produced from this. The most of the alternate, the most economical one is urea. And for an investment of $1 to $1.5 billion you put up in Karachi or KT Bandar, it needs the sea. You can start generating exports of $350 million per annum with just one plant. And you can see how much coal is available. Obviously, government of Sindh needs to spend money on the infrastructure in terms of roads, water, effluent, and things like that, which any government would do. But there's so much export potential also in addition to power generation. Moving on to the circular debt, I think a lot of discussion has already happened. So basically, the gap is between what you can collect and what you have to pay for that power. That's basically the circular debt. And there are many reasons, high inefficient, lower recovery, high transmission distribution losses. There's some administrative issues like payments are not made in time in terms of the subsidy. The regulator doesn't determine the tariff in time, and things like that. Then the other one is capacity charge. Now, a lot of the capacity charge, part of the reason why the capacity charge has gone up are basically two reasons. Just spend a couple of minutes on this. So in the past, before IPPs were introduced, the government of WAPDA used to import power plants on its own. The government used to provide the foreign exchange, and voila, the power plant is put up. Because the government didn't have any money, they asked IPPs to put up these plants. Now, where does the dollars come to purchase the equipment? So they asked the owners of these new IPPs, you arrange the dollars. So CPEC projects came in, China came, and they provided all these dollars to buy the dollar equipment. Now these repayments are all in dollars. So what is happening is that a dollar to rupee, which was 100 5 years ago, is now 300. Suddenly the capacity payments, which is primarily a return on investment, has gone up 3 times, and for no fault of the IPP, right? I mean, if the government had provided dollars at that time, this thing wouldn't have happened. The second is the capacity. If the demand is going down, you have excess capacity, so suddenly the capacity payment, which is fixed, gets divided over a less number of units, and suddenly the price of power has gone up. So excess capacity and dollar indexation are the main reasons for higher capacity payments, which even if it was a government-owned IPP, it would be the same problem, because almost 2/3 of the current tariff is capacity, and almost 40–50% of that 2/3 is to government-owned. The nuclear power plants, the LNG power plants, these are all IPPs, but it's owned by the government, and they still have dollar debt. So the capacity is still there, basically. So what is the government doing right now to mitigate this? So one thing which is good as an IPP is that the IMF have told them you cannot increase the stock of debt. So let the stock be there, and whatever flow is there, you have to balance your payment. That means either you raise prices to take care of that, or provide for in the budget, and between the two, you have to take care of your whatever the flow of that circular debt is. So they have increased, almost doubled power prices, which they hadn't done in the past for political reasons. Now, budgeting for the subsidies which you want to give, the lifeline consumers are paying 1/3 of what the other are paying, agriculture, etc. So the government needs to put specific money. It cannot be cross-subsidy from industry. It has to be from the government, and please pay on time. Crack down on the receivables of the discos, which are running into trillions as well. They started a launch and they collected something like 100 billion. And the same thing has to be continued in a more organized and governance structure as such. So with that, and then obviously the transmission and distribution losses, we have a private sector IPP, a distribution company, KE, and KE has brought its T&D down from 36% to like 15%. So there's a lot of things that can be learned from KE, and the government-owned discos can learn a lot from there. So moving on to the last section, as I said, that we tried to look at the problem. There are solutions which are there in the long term, but there are also some medium term, which is 6 months to a 2-year type of solutions, which can be done, which will improve the circular debt, or at least reduce the capacity, or maybe even reduce the cost of power as well. So first one is the T&D. So right now the government T&Ds are running at like 17% losses, which is, except 3–4% all is theft, right? So they need to just crack down on the theft part. As I said, KE has started from 36, is down to 14 today. So they can learn from their recovery. They just need to tighten it up. It's all people the staff of the discos which are involved. So just these two measures of 2% in T&D and 3% in recovery, which has already been demonstrated, by the way, is 175 billion rupees per annum. The second part is about the restructuring the IPP, Chinese IPP, Chinese debt, basically. So the government in the past tried with the Chinese owner to reduce the ROE component, the return on equity. But unfortunately, the Chinese government did not agree to this. However, what it is still open to is to restructure the debt. Now, the life of a power plant is like 30 years, but the debt is supposed to be paid in 10 years. So it's front-loaded. So, and this debt is, by the way, indirectly guaranteed by the government of Pakistan because the receivables are guaranteed by GOP and the remittances also. So the easier way is, and the cost of this debt today must be close to 10% per annum in dollar terms, right? Which is pretty expensive. So if you restructure the debt from 10 years to 30 years, and the interest from, say, 10% to like 2% to make it a G2G type of debt, right? And in the past, they have given such low. The World Bank typically gives at 2-3%. Even if it's not 2-3%, it's 4%, 5%, whatever. Idea is to increase the tenor and reduce the interest rates. And it is very much possible. So just to illustrate, if we did 30 years and 2%, the saving in cash flow saving, obviously it's not economic saving because it will spread over 30 years instead of 10 years. The cash flow saving is almost $1.5 billion, $1.7 billion a year, which is like 500 billion rupees. So that's the amount of cash flow which the government can save and either use to reduce the cost of power or reduce its own fiscal budget by reducing the subsidies it gives to the power sector. Then, in terms of making industry competitive, it's not a direct comparison, but as you know, you must have read that right now, the actual power tariff, if you take from any IPP or the basket price, is 9 to 10 cents. The industry gets it at 13, 14 cents simply because there's an element of cross-subsidy. So people who are in the lifeline consumers in agriculture, the government wants industry to subsidize, which is hurting industry. So this was pushed and accepted by the government, unfortunately. The IMF didn't allow it, but this has to be done to make industry grow. And because it has dual purpose. One is obviously industry runs, there's employment, there's taxes, and so on and so forth. The other thing is when it generates, if industry runs, more power is generated, and hence the capacity charge per unit comes down. So that is important aspect of it. The expediting south to north transmission the transmission circuits, I think there was a mention here as well. In December-January timeframe, for example, my own power plant, which has an energy component of only 13 rupees, was shut down, and RFO plants whose energy cost is like 35 to 40 rupees was being run simply because the transmission, they didn't have the capacity to transport all the cheaper molecules. It's just not us, the nuclear plants, the thermal plants, and so on and so forth. All were shut down, and RFO was running in the north, which is, in my opinion, criminal. But we did a back-of-the-envelope calculation for the whole year. The winter is obviously exaggerated, but other than that, and this saving can almost be like 200 billion rupees a year. So this is the numbers to that extent, we are talking about. Then in terms of incremental power, in the winter, the demand comes down to 10,000 megawatts. The capacity payment still has to be paid. So the capacity payment gets divided over lesser and lesser number of units. So the idea is to stimulate demand. In winter, incremental demand should be priced much lower, will stimulate demand, will be better for capacity payment, will preserve gas because then captive power will turn to grid power and a lot of benefits from there. Finally, the conversion of these 3 imported coal plants to local thermal plants. Now, I think what the government made a strategic mistake at that time in its endeavor to make sure all the plants got commissioned before the next election, which was in 2018. They allowed imported coal plants. Now, we have domestic coal. Yes, the mining would have taken time, but both could have been produced or developed simultaneously, which means develop the mine and develop the power plant. And we could have, at that time, have them on Thar coal, and we could have saved the import dollars when we import coal for these imported coal plants. But what is done is done. Now what can be done is that at the first step, a 20% blending can easily be done The mine has to be expanded for almost like $200 million or something. But the fuel saving alone, if these plants were running at full load, is almost the same number. So in dollar terms, it's a payback of 1 year. So that, and then obviously going forward, it'll be all be savings for the government as such. And obviously part of it is tariff as well. So we will save almost 20 billion rupees from tariff perspective as well. Going forward, you can easily convert them to local coal 100%. That will take 3, 4, 5 years, take some money, contracts needs to be changed and so on and so forth, but still can be done. And for the future energy security, I think that would be the best solution. So that was it from my presentation. I'll be happy. I have 5 minutes. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Well, thank you for the presentation, a very macro view of power sector. One thing issue which I think I've been also discussing at various forums is the captive power projects which different companies, textile and other companies are there. They had obviously low availability of natural gas. Obviously, natural gas is not available. Now they're using RLNG. But their efficiency level is very, very low, 25 to 28, 29. And I have been told that around 4,000, 5,000 megawatt is basically produced by this captive power project. And if they shift to the electricity available, there will be huge saving. But then other counter argument is that the supply system, the distribution system, transmission is not reliable for KE and other things. I don't know, is it technically good? But what is your comment on this? Because I feel that if they convert to the grid one, a lot of saving and the consumption increase, and the quarterly adjustment which they do increase it, that could be avoided.
Yeah. Okay. So the captive capacity, we did a study once. Yeah. It's almost 3,000 megawatts, approximately north-south combined. So the way to do it, and the government also agrees, is to have an efficiency threshold. So those, if you use the gas for process, so you're using the power and the steam together, then the efficiency can be as high as 60, 70%. So you have to price the process gas in a certain way. But for power generation, I agree with you, and that's why one of the solutions was that in winter at least, bring down the tariff from like 12, 13 cents to 6, 7 cents. They will be priced out. So gas, what the price is today, the captive power will easily cost them 10, 11 cents. So if you bring that down, automatically they will switch from captive to grid without, just through the efficiency method. And yes, they will, some of them will go to court or whatever, but it's still, a substantial part will switch to grid power from if you reduce the price of power and increase the price of gas. Sorry,
Last 1 year, the quarterly adjustment is always on the higher side because whatever the government is planning that this is the capacity. So I think this area, I don't see much talk about this use of captive power. It does come in the king, but on this, if you do it, then there can be overall macro saving to the country.
No, they are aware of this. Yeah. They are aware of this, and the previous minister, who is still the minister for 1 or 2 days, he understands that, and he agreed that it should be based on efficiency. So, but what they have done, the first step is they've increased the price of gas, almost double, tripled it. So that is already pinching it. Now, if they start with the power as well, then that conversion will take place.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. A quick question, sir. Energy is a need of everybody. Everybody needs it in one way or the other, domestic consumer or industrial. Is there a fund where this economic participation of the masses can be taken care of? I call it the economic inclusion. The inclusion of those who can share the burden. I'm a social entrepreneur, and I believe that if you have an energy fund of Pakistan, where we all can buy the shares, even if I am, somebody who has got a donkey cart, I can buy those shares. So have you ever thought from bottom up also? Because I see that most of the time the educated people are also thinking in terms of top down. So my question is, have you a vision? If you don't, wouldn't it be a good idea to share the burden with those who consume? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure about how the fund works. Maybe I can take it offline and understand what concept you have. But the government is practicing it indirectly. when they charge 13 cents to the industry and 3 cents to the lifeline consumer, they are asking the industry to share the burden of the common man, right? Because they're cross-subsidizing. So in that way, the objective is being achieved. How the fund will work, maybe we can discuss it separately.
Assalamu alaikum, Ruhail.
Ji,
So nice to see you. I would like you to go into an imaginary zone.
sorry?
I would like you to go into an imaginary zone and consider yourself as Prime Minister of Pakistan. And having all the resources and tools and a team that can help you address this challenge. So my question would be, if you are in that position, what would be the single most important thing that you will do that you think can change this game?
Privatize all the government entities. The discos, CPPA, everything. Somebody was mentioning, my CFO is also here, 60-70% of my time is spent, talking to institutions in Islamabad, do this, do that. And all the issues, if you looked at them in terms of T&D losses, and also the bureaucrats. I mean, simple things like if one bureaucrat is on the board of OGDC, for small things like a car or a director's fee, he won't let privatization happen simply because of small things. So once you privatize everything, everything will get solved.
Thank you very much.
Ji Ali, sir.
Thank you. So it's easy that to privatize everything, but we already have one private entity within the energy sector that was privatized in 2005, and we are sitting in 2024. And even today, the issues are not completely resolved at that private entity. And even still, the people say that privatization didn't work. And so how to justify this privatization, what you're talking about, and what is hindering from the privatization or deregulation of the energy sector? And once it is privatized, how to ensure that the vulnerable segment would get the electricity or energy at affordable rates?
No, you're absolutely right. But I still think I have been on the board of KE for 3 years. Their performance versus the government on discourse is far, far better in terms of the rate of improvement. Look at how Karachi is organized and so on and so forth. Of course, their own issues, a lot of them are external, which is NEPRA or the government or whatever, because the other side, part of it, fine, the consumers are all private, generation, distribution are private, but they still have a regulator which works in its own way. So in addition to privatization, you need to also revamp the regulator, and then the issues can get resolved very quickly. But yes, we can learn because that was the first privatization. There are many lessons to be learned, but the other ones will be even better. But conceptually, directionally, that's the solution. One can debate how fast and how slow and how the regulation should happen, but that's, to me, the only solution.
How to revamp NEPRA? You said about the regulator. It has like members coming up from every province. Should that be the case? Or it should be having like SPP, the State Bank of Pakistan, which is an independent body and it forms a monetary policy, another committee, and the board members are not based on some social factor or the provincial factors. Do you think NEPRA revamping have to have the members which should not be coming from provinces, and how to revamp it?
Well, that's a separate debate as to how the composition, whether it should be provincial or whatever. All I'm saying is it requires some capacity building there. I think we had a session before as well. There's a lot of capacity to be there, and the mindset needs to change, that IPPs are not thieves. They're here to contribute economically to the country. So they should be respected that way, and commitments we should be honored as well.
Absolutely. IPPs are not thieves. There are no two ways about it. But IPPs are being given very high return, like 17% guaranteed return. Then they are insured about the insurance, the Sinosure, which is a very high premium. And even in 1994 towards 2015, all the IPPs are being given higher return. And with every successive policy, the returns are moving up and the insurance premiums are
You know why the rate is going up? No, because they're not honoring that policy, and you need more and more return to honor.
Let me complete it. The returns are high. Wherever you go, the returns are high. Like if you invest in an equity, risky equity venture, your returns are high. Expected returns are high. Yeah, and expected returns are same as you invest in a T-bill. But your actual return at times are high. So when your returns are high, this means there will be period of high returns, there will be period of low returns. So your expected return would become equal to a risk-free or something like that. So when you say that returns are high, they should be paid, but the returns are high because of the risk. And because of that risk, the non-payment is very much incorporated in the returns.
So the solution to this was, when the new projects were coming in, instead of giving an upfront tariff, they should have simply had a bidding.
So why didn't they have it?
Ask the government. I'm not the one who makes the policy,
Why
right?
did IPPs bid for it when they knew this?
The policy was made by the government, probably on, let's say, insistence of the Chinese government, I'm not sure. But the policy, this policy was there. Anybody could have opted for it. I don't see any Germans, Americans, Japanese investing in IPPs.
Are you saying that the Chinese investors are being pushed by the Chinese government and it's a G2G push that's...
Initially, when CPEC was formed, I'm not into the micro, I'm sorry, I'll just take 1 minute. When the CPEC was being formed, it was a government-to-government initiative, right? There was a phase 1, there was a phase 2, everything was there. Now, the micro part of whether it should be upfront or competitive tariff, that I'm not sure how it came about. But the best way to do it was have competitive. Nobody will complain, right? The high return is high. Whatever risk-reward each investor seeks, he will get that.
So if no government, no one else than Chinese were investing, this means this was pushed by Chinese government, and that's why you're giving high returns. So it's a kind of ironic in its way.
Chalo, we'll discuss offline.